Okay, so I want you to picture something. It's October 2026, a major NATO city, one that's supposed to be, you know, strategically vital.
Yeah.
It's just fallen to Russian control.
And it happened fast. We're talking a matter of days.
A few days, and here's the kicker. The Alliance didn't lose because they ran out of ammo or because their tanks were worse. They lost because they couldn't agree on whether they were actually at war.
It's the ultimate gray zone nightmare, isn't it? I mean, the hardware was there, the troops were on the ground, but the decision-making loop, it just completely stalled.
It crashed. And that's what we're digging into today. We're looking at this, frankly, pretty terrifying report on a war game. It was run by the German newspaper Die Welt and the German War Games Center.
And we should be clear, this wasn't just, a bunch of interns rolling dice. You have to look at who was sitting at that table.
Right. This was a serious stress test.
A very serious one. You had 16 heavy hitters. We're talking former NATO generals, senior lawmakers, seasoned security analysts, people who have actually been in the Situation Room.
And they ran this simulation, this very specific scenario of a Russian incursion. And the result wasn't some, heroic last stand. It was what the report called fatal indecisiveness.
That phrase is so chilling. Fatal indecisiveness. It really suggests that the paralysis isn't a bug, it's almost a feature of how the Alliance is wired right now.
And this wasn't some huge invasion, right? We're not talking about 1 million soldiers pouring over the border.
No, not at all. And that's the really sophisticated part of the scenario. The red team, the ones playing Russia, they didn't use brute force. They used a force of only about, 15,000 troops?
15,000.
Yeah. And just to give you some perspective, that's a fraction of what we've seen chewed up in Ukraine in a single month. But here, in this simulation, 15,000 was enough. It was enough for a strategic checkmate.
Which means the red team knew exactly how to hack the NATO operating system. They weren't targeting the tanks, they were targeting the minds of the politicians. So let's get into the weeds of the scenario. October 2026. It all centers on Kaliningrad, which, as you know, is that Russian exclave wedged between Poland and Lithuania. What's the spark that lights the fire?
The spark is a manufactured humanitarian crisis. It's the classic playbook. The scenario starts with Moscow claiming there's a dire situation in Kaliningrad and they need to intervene immediately.
The humanitarian corridor excuse.
Yes, exactly. Create a problem, then demand to be the one to solve it. They claimed they had to secure critical road junctions to, ensure the safety of the population or open up supply lines.
We've seen this before. Georgia, Crimea, it's the Trojan horse strategy. You don't say, we are here to conquer. You say, we are here to help, while your special forces are already seizing the real objective.
And the objective here was a Lithuanian city, Marijampolė. The whole narrative was built around securing the Baltic Way highway and this route connecting Belarus to Kaliningrad. By framing it as this limited, temporary humanitarian operation, they created just enough ambiguity to freeze the Western response.
And that's where the fatal indecisiveness comes in. I mean, if you see huge columns of tanks rolling across the border, firing at everything, Article 5 is easy. Everyone knows what to do. But this is so much slipperier.
It is.
Let's talk about the U.S. response in the simulation, because for me, this was maybe the most jarring part of the whole report.
It's the variable that changes the entire equation. In this specific run of the simulation, the United States, it refused to invoke Article 5.
Wow. I mean, that's massive. The cornerstone of the whole alliance, an attack on one is an attack on all, and Washington just sits on its hands.
The team role-playing the U.S. administration decided to accept the Russian narrative, or at least they decided the risk of escalating was just too high to challenge it right away.
So they called it a humanitarian aid operation.
They did. They treated it as an aid operation, not an invasion. The thinking was, let's de-escalate, let's talk, let's not start World War III over a convoy of trucks, even if those trucks are full of soldiers.
Which puts the Europeans in a totally impossible position. If the U.S. says it's aid, then for Germany or Poland to start shooting, they'd have to defy the U.S., and you could argue they'd be the ones starting the war.
And that's exactly what played out with the Germans. You had the 45th Armored Brigade stationed in Lithuania. These are real combat-capable troops. They were right there on the scene.
And they did nothing.
They were effectively neutralized without firing a single shot.
I read the details on this, and it's just It's infuriating. It wasn't that they were outgunned. The Russian forces used drones to lay minefields around the German base. They basically just fenced them in.
That's right. Now put yourself in the shoes of the German commander in that room. He's looking at his screens. He can see the enemy moving on Mariupol. He has the tanks to stop them. But he's surrounded by mines, and more importantly, he has zero political cover.
His government back in Berlin is looking at Washington. They're seeing hesitation, and the order comes down. Hold position. Do not engage.
Do not escalate. So the neutralization wasn't physical. It was psychological. They were trapped in their barracks by their own rules of engagement. It's the ultimate frustration, having all that capability, but being denied the authority to use it.
And that is the disconnect, isn't it? The simulation shows that while NATO has spent years moving heavy armor to the eastern flank, we haven't fixed the software. The decision-making software is still buggy.
If you can't decide to fight in the first 24 hours, that heavy armor is just a very, very expensive paperweight.
And meanwhile, the Polish team, I can only imagine they were climbing the walls. Poland is always the most hawkish on this. They must have mobilized.
Oh, they did. Poland mobilized its army immediately. They were ready to go. But this is where that lack of U.S. leadership just shattered the coalition. Without Article 5, with the Germans paralyzed, the Poles decided they couldn't go it alone.
So they stopped.
They stopped at the Lithuanian border.
But they wouldn't cross into Lithuania to help.
No. They prioritized defending their own territory because the whole idea of collective defense had just failed. In a matter of hours, it turned into every nation for itself.
And that's how a city falls. The Russians just drive right past the paralyzed Germans and the hesitant Poles and take their objective. It's a masterclass in exploiting political division.
It really is. And it validates what Bartłomiej Kot, the Polish security analyst who was in the game, said afterwards. He had this searing insight that the West is just. We're psychologically conditioned to de-escalate.
We always want to be the adult in the room.
Exactly. We think being responsible means turning down the temperature. Kot said, and I'm paraphrasing, once we are confronted with the Russian escalation narrative, we have it ingrained in our thinking that we are the ones who have to back down.
Which hands the initiative to the aggressor every single time. All they have to do is light a match, and we scramble for the fire extinguisher instead of grabbing a weapon.
And they know this. This is the key. You have to look at what Franz Stefan Gady said. He's a brilliant analyst from Vienna, and he played the role of the Russian chief of general staff. He basically laid out his winning strategy.
I loved his breakdown. He made this distinction between capability and credibility. We obsess over capability, you know, the specs on a tank, the range of a missile.
Right, the physics of war. But Gady argues deterrence is almost all psychology. It's about what the enemy believes you will do. He said, and this is a direct quote, "I knew Germany would hesitate, and that was enough to win."
That is just chilling. I knew Germany would hesitate, not I knew I could beat their tanks. He bet on their bureaucracy. He bet on their fear.
He treated Western political dysfunction as a military asset, like it was another artillery battery. He calculated that by the time the NATO Council finished debating what a humanitarian corridor even was, his troops would already be digging in. Game over.
Let's zoom in on that objective for a second. Mariupol. To anyone listening, it's just a town. But in this context, it's basically the kill switch for the Baltic states. It controls the Suwalki corridor.
It's the most claustrophobic piece of geography in all of NATO. You're looking at a 65-kilometer strip of land connecting Poland to Lithuania. You've got Belarus on one side, Kaliningrad on the other. It is a total bottleneck.
And if you control Mariupol?
You control the road and rail lines. If Russia takes that city, they effectively slam the door shut. The Baltics, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania are instantly cut off from the rest of NATO by land. They become an island.
Which means any attempt to liberate them has to be this massive amphibious or airborne operation against very sophisticated missile systems. The difficulty level goes from hard to just a nightmare.
That's why that indecisiveness in the first 48 hours is so fatal. Once that corridor is cut, the political and military cost of reversing it becomes astronomically higher. And the players in the simulation knew that. Once the Russians were dug in, the appetite for a massive counteroffensive it dropped to zero. It became a done deal.
A fait accompli. Now, this simulation was set in 2026. I mean, that is right around the corner. And it really echoes some of the warnings we're hearing from European capitals today, like from Ruben Brekelmans, the Dutch defense minister.
Brekelmans has been sounding the alarm on this. There's this sort of comfortable myth that because Russia's bogged down in Ukraine, it'll take them a decade to rebuild. Brekelmans and others are saying, don't count on it.
Their economy is on a full war footing. They're churning out equipment.
Absolutely. The assessment is that they could generate large formations to use against NATO within just 1 year of any potential ceasefire in Ukraine. The window of vulnerability isn't 2035, it's more like 2026 or 2027.
Which brings us to the elephant in the room that this war game really exposed: European autonomy. We've been hearing about strategic autonomy from Paris and Brussels for years. This idea that Europe needs to be able to defend itself without America.
And this simulation was the acid test for that idea. And to be blunt, Europe failed.
Because when the U.S. players stepped back in the scenario, the whole European engine just seized up.
It showed that autonomy isn't just about buying European-made tanks. It's about the command structure. It's about political will. The war game showed that without the U.S. acting as the clear leader, as the backbone, the European powers don't trust each other enough to act decisively together.
Poland didn't trust Germany would fight. Germany was afraid of escalating. Everyone was looking for a leader. And when Washington wasn't there, the room just went silent.
It's that crisis of credibility all over again. If U.S. deterrence becomes questionable, for whatever reason, Europe doesn't currently have a replacement mechanism. We saw that in the game. The European pillar of NATO crumbled because it couldn't agree on what to do fast enough.
It's the coordination problem. You have over 30 democracies trying to agree on a course of action while one autocracy is just rolling down the highway.
Yeah.
The dictator has the advantage of speed.
And in hybrid warfare, speed is everything. Russia uses that confusion. They operate in that gray zone specifically to exploit that democratic lag time. If they can make us argue among ourselves for 3 days, they've won the campaign.
So if we pull back, this whole deep dive is really a reality check. We so often count tanks and jets and think, well, we have more, so we win. But this simulation suggests the hardware is almost irrelevant if the software, the political will, is corrupted by doubt.
It's a reminder that military strength is a three-legged stool. You have capability, you have capacity, and you have will. We have that capability, we're working on the capacity.
Right.
But the will, that's the variable the enemy is targeting. And right now, this simulation suggests that leg is pretty wobbly.
It makes you rethink what defense spending should even mean. Maybe we need to spend less on another ship and more on joint exercises that force political leaders to make these hard calls in real time.
Absolutely. You train soldiers to overcome fear. You have to train leaders to overcome hesitation.
I want to leave everyone with a final thought on this. We talked about Gaedy's point that deterrence is a story you tell your enemy about what you will do if they cross a line.
And that story has to be believable.
It has to be. So, in an alliance of democracies where our greatest strength is our desire for peace, how do we convince an adversary that we are actually willing to fight? How do you prove you're not bluffing without starting the very war you're trying to prevent?
That's the paradox of our time. And if we don't find an answer to it, the map of Europe could look very different in a few years.
On that rather sobering note, thanks for unpacking this with me. It's complex, but really vital stuff.
Always a pleasure to dig in.
We'll be back next time with another deep dive. Until then, stay sharp.